Hello and welcome to our complimentary webinar, which is brought to you today in partnership with TTEC, which is entitled Effortless CX Strategies that Help Brands Outperform the Competition. Today's webinar will run for approximately 60 minutes, and during that time, with the help of today's special guest, Arthur Noack, Senior Vice President Asia Pacific Operations at TTEC, we hope to engage you in the conversation and spark your interest, plus provide some ideas to take back to your respective organisations. At the end of the webinar, there will be a Q&A to answer your burning questions. I'm Fiona Keogh, CEO of Auscontact and your moderator for today. While we're waiting for everyone to join, let's use the time to run through some housekeeping with you. Remember to interact with us today to maximise the benefit, and as you know, there's no need to take too many notes because we'll be providing you with the recording of the webinar. To interact with us, please use the Q&A button on the control panel. You can ask questions or make comments for Arthur or myself from time to time. Remember that we are going to have a full Q&A session at the end of the webinar, so please type your questions as we go along so you don't forget to ask them. If you're listening through headphones or speakers and experience any issues with your internet connection, please note that on the control panel, you can click the raise hand button and the Auscontact team will rush to your aid, or you can revert to the confirmation email, which has the link to the webinar, as well as all of the relevant phone numbers and access codes relevant to your location. I know that many of you are familiar with asking questions, but let's try out the Q&A button on the control panel, just in case. And the question for today is, what is your primary reason for attending the webinar today? Arthur, maybe while we're getting some answers, let's find out why people are attending the webinar today. Why are you here?
Why am I here? Well, I think I've got the speaking job, so I think that's why I'm here. Look, maybe I'll use the opportunity with that question to share a little bit about myself, and maybe that'll kind of segue a little bit about why I'm here. So I've actually been in the contact center space for well over 20 years. I started as an associate taking calls. And then through a wide variety of different, leadership roles and opportunities, currently sit in the Manila, Philippines, and I oversee about 25,000 professionals that are delivering CX for Fortune 1000 brands all across the globe. So I have a very ground up experience in this industry. And I think it somewhat informs a little bit of what I want to talk to everybody about here today, which is really about how you leverage, frontline insights and create engagement in order to create this environment where you're building real solutions from a customer experience perspective. And that's certainly become more challenged in today's new normal of like working from home and not actually being able to create engagement in some of the ways that we're more familiar with like team meetings and engagement kind of activities. It's a little bit more challenging in a kind of remote environment. So I'm really keen to share some of those ideas with everybody here today, and I hope that others are excited about that as well.
There's a lot of requests for lots of learning and lots of take backs, Arthur, so no pressure.
Well, I'm not going to be teaching anything, and there's nothing that you can take away from this meeting. No, I'm just kidding.
All right, well, over to you.
So everybody can just drop now.
Don't tell them that. Over to you. Looking forward to hearing the story.
All right, great. So as I kind of started to already say, our world has changed, and so really our perspective as a company is that the CX delivery model that we all deliver has to adapt to it as well. And I'm sure if you're on this webinar, you're thinking about that, and I'm sure probably along that journey. But for us, one of the things that we've seen is that with COVID-19, the digital evolution of the market has really accelerated. And if you think about why that is, and you break it down, people are taking extra precautions to maintain their health and safety. And that means they're really starting to think critically about, should I really go out in public? Do I really need to interact in the ways that I used to interact? And so there is this massive shift to digital channels. You're seeing upward use of like food delivery services, right? That's a great example where people have gotten really comfortable with food delivery services. And so this is getting consumers much more comfortable with the use of digital tools. And it's also creating a demand for it, right? So as consumers are getting more comfortable with other brands that they interact with and interacting on the digital channel, they're demanding more of that type of access. And so this is definitely accelerating this digital transformation that we see in the contact center CX space. And it's also impacted us, right? Those of us who operate contact center operations, we certainly now, a lot of us are work from home. Those of us who have some operations in traditional bricks and mortar locations, we have regulations and social distancing that needs to be applied in the work environment. We're obviously contending with this digital transformation that's coming with consumers. And you're starting to see, an increased use of like AI, automation, and those types of digital tools to also support this, this transformation. And, one of the things that I think brands are all talking about is that certainly COVID-19 has presented a lot of uncertainty in people's environments. And when people have this massive change, and I think 2020 is going to be definitely known as the year of massive change, people really start to rely on reliability and consistency in terms of their service experience, and they really do not want one other thing to go wrong. And that's maybe not even the result of the work that they do with the brand that they're interacting with. It could just be the culmination of other issues, right? It's just the hair that broke the camel's back, so to speak. And so we know that customer confidence and loyalty increase when an organization delivers a frictionless experience with their product or service. And I like to talk about that as frictionless because sometimes I think we in the contact center space think our job is to become really good problem solvers and to solve problems in the most efficient and quickest way possible. And yes, we do need to do that when problems are presented, but excellent customer experience in many times will mean no experience at all. If you buy a speaker from Sonos, and that Sonos speaker works delightfully for the next 10 years, you're quite happy with Sonos's product and service without ever having to interact with Sonos's customer service support team. And so really, when we talk about frictionless customer experience, it's also about identifying why customers call and trying to prevent them from having to call in the first place, because that ultimately can drive that ideal CX we're looking for. But then we are all kind of asking ourselves in today's world, how do we deliver these frictionless customer experiences in a virtual environment? I mean, when we were in presence in centers, it was meetings, there was a lot of collaboration. I think people are really now struggling on how in a virtual setting to create that kind of engagement and collaboration that they used to have. And so hopefully as we go through today, we'll share some of our best practices on how we're ultimately doing that. Fiona, I think this one's back over to you because this is my first poll question.
It sure is, Arthur. Thank you so much. And Jess, can I get you to launch the poll? So the question is, what tools or technology do you think is the most important to enable your employees to work from home? So you can pick 3. So is it remote recruitment capabilities, or online collaboration tools, or remote training platform, or remote employee engagement platform, or a knowledge base. So Arthur, you've got clients all over the world at TTEC. What are you seeing them saying? What are you seeing as the trend?
So I think a lot of our clients are saying that they are now rethinking where their contact center service is being done, and also how it's being done. So what I think COVID-19 exposed for a lot of our clients is concentration of people in a particular geography, because when COVID-19 hit, it was entire, countries that were like overnight being shut down, and people were not able to work in the office, or entire cities where people were having to confine themselves at home. And so for the first time ever, at a global scale, disaster recovery and disaster resiliency, the clients that we support were faced with that. And in some instances, they were too concentrated in a singular region or a singular geo. And then I think before COVID-19 hit, people were thinking as disaster recovery as like earthquake, fire, physical kind of issues. We never really thought about it from a disease, or a pandemic or a virus outbreak. And I think forever going forward, when we talk disaster recovery, we're going to talk about this type of invisible threat, so to speak, and how to rectify that. And so I think a lot of clients post-COVID will say, work from home is not going to completely go away. What gets supported from home stays. And so that's ultimately the trend. Some of the stuff we're seeing today is kind of part of the new normal, right? We'll start getting back closer to where we were, but some of what we're doing today in a virtual work environment is here to stay with us.
Fantastic. Jess, if you could close the poll and let's see what our attendees are saying. Wow. Okay. So there'd be no surprises. Online collaboration tools is standing out like a sore thumb. And a remote employee engagement platform. And then we have a tie for third, a remote training platform and a knowledge base. And I would imagine that they're somewhat inextricably linked.
Well, so I guess the presentation is going to get a lot better for people on this way out, because I start with actually remote recruitment platform, and that's the thing that everybody's least interested in. So we're going to start there, and then it gets better as we go.
Well, that keeps them hanging in there for the good stuff to follow.
That's exactly right. I knew that was going to be the response. Perfect. So let's, like I mentioned, before I get there, let me kind of talk about what this is, right? We didn't realize we were going to do complex math today, but EX to the power of DX equals CX. It's a TTEC mantra. It's a way that we look at our business and kind of how we see, people and technology coming together. Said differently, these are employee experiences powered by digital experience and digital solutions. It delivers, customer experience. For us, we believe that people and technology need to work together. Technology needs to support our people and better enable them to do the work that they're supposed to do. But also, our employees can help optimize technology. A lot of times technology is deployed. It doesn't work perfectly all the time. And the people who utilize that technology can be part of the solution in terms of optimizing it and delivering results. And so, as I mentioned, I think everybody knows that digital solutions can enable efficient CX. We've all been through presentations around, this new trend of messaging, asynchronous messaging evolving from chat. We're seeing a lot of efficiency, a lot of boost in terms of sales conversion. Customers also respond more positively to the messaging channel. We've also, I think, all seen presentations on RDA, RPA, but there's a lot of, it's a tool set that ultimately allows efficiency to be long it takes for work to be completed. That's valuable to customers because the less time you're wasting of theirs in resolving an issue, the happier they ultimately are. So, RDA, RPA is really synonymous with that. And then we've spent many years talking about artificial intelligence, and deployed in the right way, ultimately can be helpful to the customer experience. And when we talk about AI, we now have evolved our thought to be more directed AI. So instead of this open-ended type of AI where you could pretend to have a natural conversation, we know that that really doesn't work. Directed AI is more intent-based, and we see the ability to successfully resolve issues that are pre-documented. So we all know this. I think as industry leaders, this is not new information. I'm just kind of reminding everyone here, but kind of the way we thought about working in the new normal is those same digital solutions that remove friction from customer experiences. We can also apply those same solutions to employee experiences in a virtual work environment particularly. And so I'm going to start first with recruitment, and I'll showcase how we did that. I'll play this video here.
Hi everyone, I'm Louie, the recruiting and onboarding buddy for candidates and new employees at TTEC. With TTEC's AI and automation capabilities, I came to life to help our candidates apply for a position, take assessments, and schedule themselves for an interview in less than 15 minutes without any human intervention. To get started, candidates can simply text me by texting the word TTEC to 97211, or they can chat with me through the chatbot on the TTEC Jobs website. Whether the candidate is a new applicant or has previously applied, I ensure their information is integrated with TTEC's applicant tracking system and provide them with login information to use as they progress through the recruiting process. After a candidate completes their application, I'm here to answer any questions they have about TTEC. I can answer questions about benefits, locations, company culture, and more. Once an offer is accepted, I continue to support our new employee to ensure that they have an amazing onboarding experience. What better way to do that than send all our new employees a welcome message from me and include a welcome video from our CEO, Ken Tuckman. I'll also send the new employees an overview of TTEC's values and some information about our employee perks. At TTEC, we're all about personalized experiences. New associates get some questions from me, nothing too personal. It's just to get to know them better, like, what's your preferred name? Do you have any pets? And what makes you laugh? Because their trainer, the associate's first manager, plays a key role in the onboarding experience, I will connect with them to share this information, as well as the employee's name and start date. I'll provide the trainer with a quick and easy template to say hello to their new employee and welcome them aboard. I'll also send the trainer a similar questionnaire to complete that I'll then share with the new employee, along with their trainer's picture, so they know who they'll be training with. This way, they'll feel like they already know the trainer when they show up to class. As the employee continues in their journey with TTEC, I share information that is useful to them. I explain key TTEC systems, employee benefits, and so much more. In fact, over the first year of employment, I will touch base with an employee over 150 times, providing them important information when they need to use it. It's so much better than the traditional new employee orientations that pile all this information in the first couple of days. Some of those touch points also include recognizing key milestones and celebrating accomplishments. For example, I send our employees messages to congratulate them on key anniversaries and messages to their supervisor, reminding them of the achievement, including a few ideas to make the day even more memorable. Even though I'm a bot, I like fostering human connections at TTEC. Strong relationships between our supervisors and their employees is the real magic, and I make that happen. And of course, I ask our employees to share all this magic on social media using our cool hashtag #ExperienceTTEC. But that's not all. As a lover of recognition, I'm excited to educate our team on our gamified career path platform, where employees can complete missions and collect badges to build a reputation within our company and get the opportunity to work on some cool ideas and solutions for our clients. See, it's more than just performance at TTEC. It's about adding value, and I highlight ways our employees can do that and earn added incentives at the same time. So, what do you think? I'm pretty amazing for a bot, huh? Thanks for watching.
Thanks, Fiona, for the dancing. So I just wanted to highlight, we actually started a lot of this work on Louis and onboarding prior to COVID. But since COVID has hit, the impacts of it have been pretty phenomenal, given the fact that, you know, we now need to do virtual recruitment. Engagement is now virtual. You saw where Louis talked about the different touch points that it has in the onboarding journey. And so we essentially documented critical milestones that we knew employees would have over the first year and made sure we had an AI engine that sat right behind there to say, oh, it's Fiona's 30-day anniversary with TTEC. Fiona should get a notification that says thank you. So she'll get one from Louis, but it's also Fiona's boss, Jessica, who will also get a notification. And, you know, Jessica will reach out to Fiona and say, hey, Fiona, hey, congratulations for completing your 30 days. So all of this kind of reminder system that we've built in with the AI fosters engagement and is even more critical in a remote environment, right? Where I'm not necessarily reminded by people every day in terms of the milestones that they might be hitting. And so this AI, you know, technology ultimately helps support that. And we've seen, oops, I'm not supposed to do that. And we're seeing some value in terms of the way that we engage our employees now in a more virtual type of workplace setting. It also goes into training. And so, you know, training has to be completely different. Nobody likes being talked at for, you know, 8 hours in a day. And particularly, it wasn't before, and it particularly is not now in a remote environment. And so some of the things that we've, you know, we're starting to convert prior to COVID, but it's just really accelerated now, is more simulated based learning. So mimicking activities that you're doing out on the production floor into the classroom, doing much more role play, online asynchronous learning. So basically assign a class, everybody goes away, kind of takes it online on their own speed, and then you kind of regroup together and do more collaboration and discussion around the course that you just completed, versus type of lecture style where you have a presenter teaching and then people listening. While that's not completely going away, there's some things that just need to be instructed. We have found that it's about the tool set you're equipping people with, right? So our work from home employees, webcams, we want to be able to see them. It's been shown and proven, like, you know, if you're collaborating and you're not actually seeing the other people on the other end, it's likely that they are multitasking or being distracted. And so it's important to have that visual. And then if you are a trainer, being able to maintain that visual contact is difficult if you don't at least have two monitors, because you need to be able to see the learners on one side and then you need to be able to see the courseware on the other. So while it's more simulated type of learning, it's also more tools that you're enabling with your remote workforce. And we've seen some really good results in terms of when you move more simulated based. I mean, this is somewhat intuitive information on this slide. The more practical kind of training you deliver versus lecture-based training, the result is you can actually shorten the length of your training program and actually get a better result. And so this slide, I think, is here just to remind everyone that, like, you know, simulations are good even if you go back to a bricks and mortar type of learning environment. And then we've also had to invest in tools around how we actually engage remote employees. And so I'll start off with the easiest one, right, which is video collaboration, right? I mean, I'm sure all of us are familiar to maybe a level of nausea, the video collaboration of like Zoom, Teams, Google, I mean, all those that are out there. And I think that's one that's really important. But video is more important, right? Because I think that there's a tendency sometimes for people to use these tools and to use them as fancy audio conference bridges. But the reality is video and that digitization of that face-to-face experience is really important. The other piece is around online learning. So making online learning something that you make available to your employees. It's a great way to keep people engaged, have them focused on professional development. There's tons of time that people now have on hand, and a lot of people are using that to better themselves, to become the best version of themselves that they can possibly be. Doesn't always mean that they're going to spend that time on professional work development. Some of it may be unlocking, hidden skills like cooking or playing the violin, but that's fine. I think people in this type of setting want to focus on themselves and become better. And so what we've also deployed for our employees is this gamified talent engine. And so we worked to create a badging system where people can unlock different awards through can complete. Those rewards unlock monetary and non-monetary benefits. So monetary, you can convert some of those points and go to a store and redeem them for your typical gift card or whatever. But the non-monetary is just bragging rights. I just want to have this trophy associated with my name, so I can walk around the company saying, I'm a guru employee, and that happened because I unlocked all these different levels on this gamification system. And what we have found is that we deployed gamification prior to COVID, but what we found is that when people went remote, they really went very active in the gamification platform. And so I highlighted a quote from one of our employees here. They felt that it helped them to stay connected. It was a way for our leaders to use the tool as another avenue of recognition. It also enabled some of the access to some of the online courses that they could complete in order to work on their own professional development, but they would also then get points and achievements that they would unlock as they did that. And the reaction was that it was just a great way for employees to stay engaged with the business in a very fun, kind of gamified way. But when we think about employee engagement, I think instantly, our minds are filled with, oh, it's the fun stuff. It's the the parties and the networking, and that's what we need to do in engagement. It's not always that. Engaging employees sometimes means ultimately harnessing some of their insights and using that to actually make the customer experience that they interact with better. A lot of times associates in contact centers are running really hard to hit their AHT targets, to hit their FCR numbers, to hit their CSAT numbers. Those are all very tactical metrics, right? They're very tactical measures of contact center success. They don't really step out of that tactical day-to-day very often and think about, is this process or is this technology really working optimally for the customer? And if not, do I actually have a better way to do that? And do I have the opportunity to collaborate with my peers on making suggestions to the organization that I support on how to make that better? And like I said, my background is I've come through this space, associate to various different levels, and I firsthand know the value of frontline insights. Some of my personal career success has been just really taking the ideas of employees and creating an avenue or a pathway for them to be heard and for them to have an ROI and a business case attached to them. And then by enabling that, I unlocked tremendous results and tremendous positivity. And it wasn't my own personal idea. I just, as a leader, removed the obstacle for enabling those ideas. And so when you think about engagement, I want you to think about it that way. But then how do you get teams to really collaborate on these ideas in this strategic way, remote? That was a problem that we tried to solve, and I'll try to play this short video that tries to highlight how we did that.
Now more than ever, people need connections. and their expectations for an excellent customer experience remain.
Everyone is figuring out how to navigate this new world.
This is a journey for businesses and customers. It will be full of new challenges, and what worked before won't work anymore.
With these changes, there are opportunities to identify failure points in customer journeys and to lead proactive solutions. That is our role.
Change is not perfect the first time.
Our role is to keep making customer journeys smooth and seamless.
Seeing customer experiences firsthand.
We are the frontliners of the customer transformation occurring in these companies.
We are pioneering new methods and leveraging new technologies to map customer journeys.
In challenging times, one can choose to lead or to follow. We choose to lead with proactive solutions.
What you see at the end of that video is how we now conduct customer journey mapping with our frontline teams in order to better understand end-to-end customer journeys. And the whole goal is to start to emerge from traditional contact center measures of like FCR, AHT, and CSAT, and really start to focus on what's optimal from a customer perspective. And really, the mantra that I would instill with everyone today is sometimes the best customer experience may actually be no experience at all. If you can avoid a customer from having a problem or experiencing friction with the brand you support, that ideally is the best customer experience. And you'll never get a CSAT survey for it. You'll never get an AHT measure for it, but your customers will ultimately be happy for it. And so we have a volume of proactive solutions that we've been working on in the company. We did it in 2019. The ideas have culminated in a tremendous amount of savings for our clients. 5 to 7% of their total annualized like contact center spend, we believe we could have reduced through the implementation of these ideas. We've had tremendous success partnering with our clients and implementing these ideas. And about a third of these solutions include some level of, optimizing the digital technology. So the AI engines, the RPA, RDA, it's just, they don't work 100% of the time for 100% of the scenarios. And if you can get better at optimizing those solutions, a lot of that can drive some of this impact and support. So it's just this view that we can do more than be tactical, and we can be strategic. And since we had this success in 2019, we wanted to make sure we maintain an avenue for people to collaborate remotely. And we've just really modernized the approach to leverage these online collaboration tools, the video conferencing, in order to do these customer journey maps just virtually instead of in person. And we're seeing some tremendous success. So that now brings Fiona on stage to introduce the second and my last poll.
Thanks, Arthur, and thank you for the dancing reference. Thankfully, the audience couldn't see it. So, Jess, if you could launch the poll, could you please pick the top 3 elements that you believe are needed to help employees succeed while working from home? One of the top 3, having the right technology at home, continuous training and career development at home. Is it collaboration and engagement with your manager and teammates? Or is it employee health and wellness? Or the reinforcement of the company culture and values? Again, Arthur, you've been in lockdown in the Philippines for a fairly significant period of time, and I know you share in particular the pain of our friends in Melbourne in particular. What have you personally found is of value? What do you favour?
Aside from a wine bottle every night?
That's mandatory.
No, in all seriousness, I do think it's about maintaining, for me personally, so just some background, Manila's had one of the longest lockdowns, I think, of any country. We're only allowed to go out if you need to go grocery, get some pharmaceutical items, and pretty much that's it, unless you are an approved business to do work, and then you have a special permit to work. But they advocate work from home for those that can. And so this lockdown has been in place since like March. And so for me, I think it's about a routine. So it's very easy to, in this remote work environment, get out of a routine and then start to too easily blend home life, work life, and then maybe, no life, right? And so I say to people all the time, it sometimes feels like it's Groundhog Day. Like I wake up from my bed, I go to the office, I go on the couch, and then I go back to bed, and then I do it all over again. So it's really about instilling and finding that new normal and that new routine and some discipline around it. I find I find solace in the discipline in that routine, and then instituting some things that maybe were not part of your version of normal, but adapting. So I used to, work out at a gym. We definitely cannot do that these days. And so it's about, okay, like, can I do some crunches on the floor? I'm not a big fan of working from home, but actually it's been helpful to kind of try to get into some kind of a routine. And I also felt like you should give yourself some allowance that this normal is not your normal. So the fact that you're not doing your normal, it just means you have to adapt and don't hold yourself to the same expectations of what you were doing before you hit quarantine. So not sure if that's helpful to somebody, but I've found some solace around that. I'm getting ready for us to be able to open the doors and emerge out of my house arrest. So hopefully that happens soon.
Well, let's hope Melbourne's not far behind you. Jess, if you could close the poll and let's find out what our attendees have said. So bang on half, collaboration and engagement with their manager and teammates. And with a bullet number 2, having the right technology at home, and then a 3-way split between the other options.
Yeah.
Arthur, comments?
I think really, it's not surprising, the collaboration and engagement with manager and teammates. I think it's really around also sharing best practices and getting creative. And so we've been doing some like virtual happy hours with some of our teammates. But everything gets stale, right? So like things that worked for a period of time and were new and exciting, stop working. So it's about also kind of reinventing and, sharing best practices on how you can, engage and collaborate in different ways. And as long as you're able to kind of continue to change that up, it's helpful. We just did a recognition dinner with a team of ours where we actually sent them dinner kits, right? And the whole team was able to get together and leverage the dinner kit. So it was a shared experience that you could have, virtually. And then we did executive leader drop-ins where people, dropped in as like special guests. And so while people have done this whole like, dining remotely, before, it's not a new concept. It was kind of new to have, dinner kits sent out. The fact that like we all had a shared experience, executive leaders dropped in. So that, just change it up a little bit to keep it fun and exciting. And then the other thing is, please don't underestimate employee health and wellness in this time. I've heard a lot of employees particularly struggling with the lack of engagement. And I think we sometimes, when we think about health and wellness, we always think about the physical fitness. I think this is a mentally straining time for people. And I think people need, a mental balance. And I think check-ins really help, but it's also an opportunity for us to be understanding of each other. It is not normal for social creatures like humans to be put in isolation the way that we have been. And I think it's okay for people to not feel well about that. And while this is not highly rated here, it would be one that I would just call out as one that I have seen as a trend, and one that I think leaders should be really sensitive towards, and trying to confront head on to provide support in what are otherwise really very difficult times.
Arthur, that was so heartfelt and so genuine. Thank you. I couldn't concur more with you. I think we're really going to see some challenges bubbling to the top, even more so as we go deeper and longer into lockdown. So with that, I think we're getting close to the end.
Yeah, I think this is my summary slide. So for me, working at home requires an emphasis on culture. We had an emphasis on culture prior to this whole transition. We've just kind of modified that culture emphasis and adapted it to the new normal. And we've tried to take that in all segments of what we do. And so you've seen me go through remote, recruitment, more simulated based kind of e-learning type of courseware in terms of an approach. Don't forget rewards and recognition. We use a gamification platform to enable ours. Organizations can think about how they continue to do that remotely. And it doesn't have to necessarily be gamification. These virtual team building activities, I highlighted some examples. Collaboration continues to remain important. Solve problems together. People want to solve problems, and getting groups of people to say, hey, let's work on something that breaks us from our day-to-day activities of answering customer inquiries and actually solving and working together to solve a problem more strategically. It's a great way to enrich the job, and I would encourage people to ultimately do that. We just finished talking about health, financial, mental wellness. And there's also opportunities to do virtual community events. There's a lot of virtual events and virtual webinars that communities are putting on. It's another engagement opportunity for you to bond with your team. We're seeing good results, and I hope that people take away from this conference some of the ideas that we've had, and that inspires some action within their own organizations. And that's really it. So I think now we're in the Q&A section.
We are. So get those questions coming in. So to kick off, just during the webinar, there was a question about what's the difference between RPA and RDA, Arthur. Can you just share a little bit more about the difference between the two?
So it's a very thin line between RDA and RPA. I think the difference, and I actually don't know which one goes which, right? But RDA, I believe, is associate-facing automation. So it's desktop automation. So it's like when I have a process and I am the associate processing it, the fact that I can click a button and it enables me to just complete that process quicker, like a macro type of thing, that I think is RDA, the fact that it requires human intervention. RPA is something that sits in the background and is automatic, that doesn't require human intervention. So it's anything, and a lot of it stuff is stuff that happens in back office. So you might have, in terms of back office transactions, some AI logic that ultimately looks at that process and then ultimately automates it. And because it does not require like somebody actually sitting at the desk and pressing a button, I believe it's RPA. The reason that they're used together is that that line is so thin. Somebody probably after this webinar is gonna contact me on social media to say I explained it wrong and I got it completely opposite. But like it really I think is just the difference between whether it's people engaged or not. And I think that's why it's kind of used at the same line, because it's a very thin line between the difference between the two.
I think you did a good job explaining, actually.
Thank
you for that. All right. So what are the risks and opportunities of making work from home a more permanent option?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So from a risk perspective, I think the one that our clients are saying that there's two ways of looking at that risk. So one is the disaster recovery risk that I talked about before. And so it's the idea of work at home actually addressing risk that I've had in my business before. And a lot of our clients are telling us that going forward, a percentage of the business will always be work from home to give that disaster resiliency. So when you think about that, the new risk that starts to emerge, right, is customer data protection. And if you think about the processes that we support in contact centers, they're very customer centric. And I think companies are re-looking the way that they architect these processes to minimize the data risk that may be exposed there. And so I'll give a perfect example. I completed a shopping experience completely online. It was through a chat experience with an associate. It was actually kind of cool because they noticed I hadn't been shopping. They are traditionally a retail store establishment. They converted to this new normal by this online presence. And so they reached out to me to advise me that they have this online shopping presence. And so they completed my shopping cart with me. But then when I went to make the payment, instead of asking me for my credit card details, they sent me to an online link. I completed the credit card details on a secure page. And then I went back to the associate to complete that transaction. I think that's one example where companies are going to have to rethink the way that they handle sensitive data to address the new risk of maintaining a work-at-home operation permanently. In terms of opportunities, so the opportunities of work at home, I think customers are really appreciating a couple of things. So work at home enables you to recruit in areas that are no longer confined by physical borders. So for example, if you do work at home in Australia, you can now recruit pan-Australia, right? Because you can have a virtual workforce, and so you can now access labor markets that you may not have had access for it. So it deepens your talent pool. The other nice value of work at home models, and this was true prior to COVID, is that response to surge volume is much stronger in a work at home atmosphere. Why? Because when you have a surge in volume, it's usually an unexpected spike, right? And so you have this surge event. You need people to get on, working in order to respond to this surge customer demand. In traditional brick and mortar contact centers, people have to come into the office, they have to drive, they have to get dressed, they have to do all this stuff. And so the response rate is pretty low. When you have a work at home environment, that response rate is like 10x the response rate of bricks and mortar staff. And so rapidly and quickly, you can get a workforce mobilized who's looking to pick up some extra hours or some overtime in order to respond to customer demand. And so clients are really seeing that at home gives them that flexibility and allows them to kind of smooth out these surge events. And so they're pretty excited about that. And hence, I think, post the new normal, there will always be this percentage of workforce that'll be work at home.
Fantastic. And I've seen some interesting examples of how contact centers are managing security and risks at home, especially in judging in Hong Kong, China, and Singapore, where we're seeing organisations with cameras that are looking at what the agents are doing, which doesn't necessarily tell you what they're doing on the screen, so I don't know how useful that is. But we've also seen a fair bit of, screen scraping, etc., in terms of managing how people are navigating around their resources. So the next question that we have is, what are the most important skills and qualities needed for a contact center agent?
Well, I think they're evolving, right? So for me, today's world requires individuals who are have a high emotional intelligence, and so we talk about this thing called emotional IQ or EQ. And I think that, absolutely now we're seeing that that's really, highly important. A lot of the transactions have been automated through, AI or digitization efforts. And so what's left is really complex, problem solving. And so I think as employees, get evaluated, I think emotional intelligence becomes really important. But I do think it's this desire for, more complex, problem-solving capability. And that's why I think organizations in the contact center space also have to evolve, because the people who have this complex problem-solving capability don't necessarily want to do the factory line work of contact centers. call after call, email after email, chat after chat, message after message. It can feel a little bit boring and kind of like making the donuts every single day. And so what we've tried to do as an organization is to say, yeah, the job is tactical. However, we also want you to think about it more holistically. And that's where this customer journey mapping that I talked about earlier in the presentation is really important. Because if you're going to attract people with the capability set to do complex problem solving, but you don't allow them to do that in a strategic way or exercise that muscle in what they see as a more enriched type of capability, then they're going to feel very tactical, and the job's going to start to feel mundane. And so leveraging this new emotionally intelligent, complex problem-solving workforce needs to be done in such a way that you keep them engaged. And that's why we have our staff working on these customer journey maps, identifying failure points, building business cases that they can take to organizations, and they can say, if you make these modifications, we can make some change. And these aren't like complete over architecture, like let's not try to boil the ocean here. I'm not asking people to really over architect like customer strategy design and like change customers and products and all this other kind of big stuff. We leave that for like the high level, high pay grade people to do for organizations. These are the blind spots in customer experience. These are, 80% of the time in this online page works for customers, but in 10% of the time in this particular customer scenario, customers are not getting what they want. And if we make this minor change, we can now proactively address what customers need, and it resolves people from having to contact us in the first place. So think small pebbles or medium-sized pebbles versus big, large, strategic changes in company direction. And I think that's a way to get people engaged, enriched, and leveraging the skill set, which I think is the new normal of a contact center associate today.
Thank you. Contact centres are growing in Australia during this COVID period, and also the 3 years prior, it's been growing by about 35%, which is great for the industry. So we're seeing companies that are growing, but they're choosing to grow as a remote workforce. So what are the next best steps to take? So what would you take as your first, second, or third step, for instance?
In growing a remote workforce?
Yes.
Yeah, so for me, I think it would be about thinking about that growth and the tool set that's going to be able to support that growth, right? So if you're going to build a remote workforce, for me, you got to think about all steps in that employee life cycle, in that employee journey. So how you recruit, how you train, how you onboard within the first 90 days, because that's a very sensitive time for employees. And then life cycle management of the employee. And then a lot of times people don't talk about this, but it's important, is also the exit process, right? And if you think about all these 5 stages of an employee life cycle, think about whether you've really tuned them to a remote workforce, right? So if you're trying to do a remote workforce, do you really have remote recruiting? And how easy is it to use that? Have you gone through your own recruitment steps? Is it easy remote? Does it work the way that you expect it to? Your training. If you think about the tool set that's required, do the trainers have the right setup in their homes? Do they have dual monitors? Are you requiring webcams for all people in your remote workforce? So if you think about each step, you have to really think about whether you've been set up for a remote environment. And then I think, as with anything, you should measure, right? And so measurement is really important to understand impacts. I know that we are over surveyed, but I think you don't need to do complex surveys to get a health and a sense of how people are experiencing your onboarding in that remote journey. And you can just do I'm a 1 or a 5 today, and you can do that in each stage and get some evaluations that allow you to understand whether you're doing a good job in these areas. And I feel like everything's iterative. I feel like sometimes in transformational change, we try to work so hard to get it perfect before we deploy it that we actually don't deploy it soon enough, and that actually creates more of a problem. For me, it's better to deploy a minimally viable product that's about 60, 70% of the way there, and then just explain to people that we're going to be working through it and continue to iterate and make it better and stronger, and work through that process. And if you have that measurement approach and can iterate, you can really strengthen your remote workforce capabilities and the tool set. But it's constantly just listening to employees and getting the measurements and getting their feedback and then responding to that change.
Well, thank you. So there's no more questions. So I would love to say thank you very much, Arthur, for your passion, your energy, and all the information that you have shared with our audience today. It's been just wonderful to hear your story and your personal connection to it all. It's absolutely palpable. Do you have any closing remarks?
No, I don't. I mean, I think, like I said before, I think it's about a focus on the individual and the employee. And I think we're all trying to figure out what new normal looks like. And I think, sometimes it's hard as leaders to admit that we don't have all the answers, but I don't have all the answers. And I think it's important that other people hear me sometimes say that, because I think sometimes people sharing what they're going through and the fact that it is a confusing time for all of us, it's a difficult time for all of us, can actually be therapeutic. And for me, I just feel like this is a very tough situation for a lot of people, and I think we should be open and talking about that, and helping us to just really connect and kind of make our way through, and hopefully get back to the lives that we had before 2020.
Indeed, and I hope one day we will again share a glass of red wine at Sydney Harbour, watching the sunsets. But thank you once again, Arthur. Thank you to the team at TTEC for bringing us today's webinar. And thank you to all of you for joining us for the last 60 minutes. I hope that you have some gold to take back to your organisations. Have a wonderful rest of your day wherever you may be, and stay safe. Bye.
Thank you.